What's up guys, Thomas here with another tutorial, and this time I'll be doing a head painting demo. Let's go! First things first, I'm starting out with a really rough line drawing that I'll use as a basis for the structure of the head. Notice that even though I'm going to cover up the neck and chin with hair, I'm making sure to still draw it in the lay-in so I have a sense of perspective, depth, and structure to the head. This will prevent me from warping facial features and causing the face to melt and become lopsided. I won't go into proportion too much here since so many other people have talked about it better than I can, but I'll just say that I start with the nose as a rudder, branching outwards towards the eyes. The shape of that inverse trapezoid that's created by the eyes and nose is key to proportion and likeness, and you can adjust it to change up your character's faces. Hand in hand with using the nose as an anchor for perspective, I'm trying to push the dimensionality of my forms through my understanding of space. You can see it when I'm drawing the eyes. I'm using form lines to tell how deep the eye socket is, how the eyelid is going to curve and warp around that eye. Think about it, the eye is just a ball. So you really want to make sure you get that wrap around those forms and for all the other forms in the head. For the beard, I actually drew his mouth first and then built the hair up over top of it, keeping in mind the space the forms would take up and wrapping them to overlap. All of this understanding of form is super important to figure out, especially since I'm going to be lighting this head. I'm going to need to understand how all of these forms wrap so that I know where the light and shadows will fall. After all of this setup, it's time to go into the painting. For this demo, I'm going to be starting with black and white, then overlay color on top of those values. I've dropped a flat mid-grain as the background, and I start my painting by defining the shadow shapes. I'm using a simple hard round brush to block in the shadow side, keeping all the edges hard. After I've put these hard edges down, I'll soften up the areas that are turning away from the light. So for areas like the cheek and the forehead, I'll use a big round soft brush, creating contrast between hard and soft edges. This is what's going to help your form spring to life. The cast shadow under the nose remains hard-edged, showing where the light is coming from and contrasting with the soft edges around it. A prime example of someone taking this technique to its fullest is Nathan Fowkes, who you guys should definitely give a look. I've also decided to have my character here be a light object on a dark background, so his hair will be really high white in some areas against this deep dark black. As I move along, I'll start bouncing between dark and light, this time putting in areas of extreme shadow called ambient occlusion, or in other words, somewhere where no light reaches. For highlights, I'll use pure white sparingly, mostly for reflection and wetness in the eyes. On top of this value contrast, I'll start to get a contrast in brushes, using rougher strokes for his leathery skin and keeping softer areas for his hair. I'm also starting to define more surfaces while stroking with the form. Like the area from the nose to the cheekbone, you'll see strokes that follow the wrap of the form. This is really important in leading the viewer's eye, not so much overall, but leading the viewer's eye on that specific form. You can almost carve it like you're sculpting. After that, I'll add some small details like liver spots and start noodling with individual brushstrokes using the smudge tool. Again, I'm just pushing and pulling form in and out of light, and I use it to reinforce the depth and structure I drew in the beginning. Before moving into color, I'll take time to play with the overall values. I think it's important to introduce steps where you can play and keep a painting from looking too academic, so I'm using curves layers and layer masks to deepen some of the shadows and pull up brighter lights in areas, especially in the eye that's closest to the viewer. I'm trying to pop it and have you look there first. For the jump to color, I'm using overlay layers of orange, pink, and pale light tones. I use multiple layers of color so I get a bit more richness than just using one layer of flat color as an overlay. I'm keeping his cheek area a redder tone with blood closer to the surface, and a yellow tone up top since the bone is so close to the skin, and then a blue-gray for the chin and beard. If you want to find out more about these color zones and other lighting tips, I'd suggest checking out James Gurney's book called Color and Light. For his eyes, I overlaid a bright green and hue shifted around until I settled on a color I liked. You can see me bring in other spots of color too, this time using complements of yellow in the skin and blue on the side of the hair. To unify the palette, I decided to tint the background green. So you've got yellow, blue, and green all together, mixing, moving, and hopefully balancing in a way that's pleasant to look at. Now here you'll actually see me messing around with some clothing and pattern in his torso, but because I didn't draw it out in the beginning, I'm shooting in the dark, trying to find any anchor point. As a result, it's messy, ambiguous, and I decided to scrap it because I didn't plan for it in the beginning. This is what I'm talking about. If your ideas aren't solved in the beginning, and if you don't have a clarity of thought process, you won't be able to execute. The last few touches are taking a copy merge version of the entire image, essentially like dropping a flat JPEG image of the painting in a new layer, and setting this flat layer to screen, using Gaussian blur to create a blown out version of the lighting. Then I'll put another layer mask on it and bring back selective areas to use as highlights. Hopefully this video helped you guys out with some head painting, and I'd love to see what you guys do with it. Feel free to subscribe and keep an eye out for more tutorials I've got in the works. You can also check out my other tutorials on watercolor and character design. Thanks for watching, my name's Thomas, and I'll see you around.